Thank you for tuning in today to episode 10. Today we will be discussing ArrayList. Our task will be that Ms. Bacon has a class with 10 students that she would like to add their grades and their name to a list. We will be doing this with an ArrayList. Last week we were using array. This week we'll be using an ArrayList. Some of the method that we're going to cover when it comes to ArrayList is add, get method, size method, and the remove method. So without any further delay, we're going to go ahead and begin. A couple of things I want to mention about an array list versus an array. Array list, you can change the size of your array list. With an array, once when we set that size to 10, to not go over that size, we'd have to reset it again and begin from the beginning. With an array list, you can start with 2, go up to 3, go down to 4, go up to 3, from 3 to 4, or you can go down to 2. Or you can actually switch around where the data is being put. So if you have a data, an index of 2, you can move that to 1, or you can move that to 4. Those are the beauties of ArrayList. One thing that ArrayList is not, that arrays you can accomplish with, is the multi-dimensional phase of arrays. So without any delays, let's again begin. Just to show you our little program, what it's supposed to do. So if I go ahead and click run, it's going to add John's to this array. Then what we're going to do is call his name and his grades, and after that we're going to remove John, and we're going to validate that by showing that he's no longer in this array list. So let me go ahead and run this bit of code. It's going to ask for John's grade. We're going to go ahead and put 85, enter. So see here, put the name John, got the output of 85, which is his grade. Then what I did is on line 11, I removed John from this array list, and then to validate that and to print it out so we can see what we did, we get nulls here. There's nothing in our array list after I moved John, because John was the only one I inserted. Let's go ahead and go to the actual code. Again, I was using the main method to run this. Right here, I was using a different class to run the actual code, so we're going to leave this class for now. Let's bring this back. Go ahead. What I'm going to do, I know two lessons ago I did this. I'm going to walk through the code. I already wrote the code, so I'm just going to walk through it and show you exactly what I did. What I first started off with, I declared an array list, and this is how you do it. On line 8, if you see, I put down array list, I name my array equals new array list, and this is for the student grades. Then I noticed a little difference, that instead of putting these two alligator signs, I call them greater than or less than signs. Right here I put, since this array is a string, I put string student name equals new array list. So you can declare this array list. When you're using array list, you can declare it whichever way you want to. You have two options here. You can do it this way, or you can do it this way when it's a string. Okay, so we declared both of our array lists, one to hold the student's name and the other one to hold the student's grade. And if we scroll down here, this is where I actually add this. Well, if you go back to my main method here, where I run the code, you notice what I do is first I add student's name. So these are out of order, so I'm going to start with this one, because what I did is I made this method call the method above. So we have our add student's name. I pass a string in, and then I set a to the size of the array. So before we start the array, I get the size of it. Then I said student name, because this will be 0, so that's why I did it that way. So student name. And here's where we use our add method. So whenever we want to add anything to an array list, you use your add method. And what do I want to add to this array list? I want to add the name. So the name that I passed in, I'm going to use it down here, put it within my add method, and now that name is saved in this array list. And now what I do, I call the add student grade method, and this method is where I'm going to add the name of the grade of the student, which is up here. And again, remember when I had the int, equal to the size of the array. So what I did here is I passed that number that I got up here. So if this was the second person I was adding to the array list, the size of the array would be 1. Right now the size of the array is 0, because remember when we're dealing with array list, we start with 0 and we go on up. So the first position in an array list would be 0, just like an array. The first position would be 0. So I pass my 0 up here. So I have a string right here that I'm using the J option pane again. And again, this is the pop-up message that we received. So I say, this is the question I have in the pop-up. You know what, let me run it here so you can see exactly how that looks. Ask John, and here's a pop-up right here. Please enter the student grade. And you have your option to enter the grade of the student. Oops. So then student grade, this is the title of the little J option pane, the little pop-up menu. And then it's a question message. And once when I get that value, I go ahead and again, here I'm using that add method for the array list, passing in the student number, which is 0 right now. So if we had another student, it would be 1. So in the first position of this array list, I'm adding the grade that I just inserted. Okay, that's how you add someone or add any values to an array list. Let's go down here and see what I did. Then you go back to the main method. The second option I did was to remove John. What I did here, again, I passed the name, which is a string argument, and I have 2 integers here that's starting at 0. So basically what I'm doing is a for loop. I'm basically taking this and going through the array, which is student names. This is an enhanced for loop. So basically it goes through this. The first option in this, it pulls it in and puts it into this string, and this string comes down here in this if statement and compares, does this string in the first position equal the name? And remember, the name that I entered was John. So it goes through, it says, okay, in this array, take out the first index the first value in the first index, put it in here, bring it down here, and compare it, see if it equals. If it equals, take the position, this counter here that I have, and set it to equal the student ID. So if it doesn't equal, it goes on to 1. And the reason why I did this is just so I can know which one to enter, because since array lists are not multi-dimensional, I have to have 2 array lists. This is how I'm using this to find the index for the second array. So let's say, okay, equals John. So it takes, right now this counter is at 0. So it sets student ID variable, which is this one up here, to 0. Now if it was 2, let's set this to 2. Since it's at the position of 0 in the array list, it sets it at 0. And if it didn't find it, I have my counter to increment. But since it found it, it ends here. And it says student name, remove. And you see here, since this is set at 0, when you're removing, you use the index. So if you're at position 0, you go ahead and use 0 to remove that value. If I want to remove the student at the second position, then I'll pass in here number 2. So then I remove the student's name, and then also in the same method, I want to go ahead and call this method, which I pass the same value I found here. Since John is going to be in the first slot, his grade is also going to be in the first slot. If John was in the second slot, his grade would be in the second slot. And the reason why I have to do that, again, array lists are not multi-dimensional. And we have here remove. We have the variable, or not the variable, excuse me, the number or the position where this grade is in that I want to move. Okay, so let's run this one more time. So again, while this code is running, so first what we do, we add John. If we look here, right, right here, add student name. So I put John in here. And then what it does, it puts John's name, and then after that it asks for this method right here is where we're at. So we already did these two when we add the student's name, and equals a, size is 0 right now, student name, add student name, and now we call this method, which this method displays the pop-up menu, which if you look, student grade right here, please enter the grade right here, and then it's a question pop-up message. So we have our little question mark icon right here. Then I enter the grade 88, click OK, and we see John 88, and then I remove it, go back here. So after I insert John, I verify that he's inserted, and I verify that his grade is inserted. Go back here. Now what I do, I said remove student. Go here, scroll down to remove student. Here we pass the string name again, which is what I did, and then that goes in and calculates and searches for John, his name, in this array list. Once we find it, we pass the index of where we found John's name into the remove student grade, which is below here. And we can put a loop so we can continuously go through this, and it'll keep asking, okay, do you want to remove this person? Do you want to add this person? So that's basically how an array list works. So let me show you where we use the size of the array. Where are you? Okay, so we didn't actually use the size in the array, but you know what? Let me come here and add. So I'm gonna comment this out. Let me go ahead and comment this out. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, and then we're gonna go ahead and use run one dot. We're going to look at both of them. Student name dot size, and then we're going to also look at run dot student grade dot size. Okay, we're going to put this in sys out. Delete this right here, and we're just doing this just so we can see the size of the array after I add values to it. Okay, plus sign, close, watch this out, put my semicolon, save it, and let's run it. 88, okay, and you see here, our array list size is at 1. If we use the same block code, come up here, let's put it down here, we declared it, save it, let's run it. So you're going to see before and after the difference. So at first, both arrays they have 0 value in it, their size is 0. So we'll say 78, okay. So after we add one, the size, and this is kind of what I used here. It's my mistake right here. Right here. So a equals, at the beginning when we're adding name, it's 0. So we're adding this at the first position, which is 0. Again, remember indexing, when you're indexing with array lists, arrays, you'll start at 0, 1. So John is at 0 really. His index is 0. But the size of the array is 1. So that makes sense. And this is why I got the size first before I added it, so I can use this to add so I can add it to the grade as well. Our next lesson, what we're going to do, since we're getting better at ArrayList and taking data, we're going to actually start jumping into saving the data to a file. So that's the next step we're going to take here. Hopefully you guys enjoy this lesson. Comment below if you either like me going through the code, or do you want me just to pre-write it and then go through what I was thinking and how I wrote the code. Until next time, thank you for watching. You guys have a wonderful day.